Hello and welcome to a brand new day. And of course, it is Vanguard Live. And here on Vanguard Live, this is our flagship program that today in the news where we talk about everything in the newspaper as well as review the newspaper and analyze what's going on in the country. My name is Precious Chukudi, and it's good to be here this morning. And I have with me my wonderful, delectable co-host, Dami.
Alhamdulillah, Shaki.
Okay, so Damilola, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm good. And you?
Well, we're still dealing with the heat. The weather is still
I
hot.
really wish Mata would come back.
Yesterday I was reading on Twitter where someone was talking about the fact that we Nigerians we complain about everything.
Everything.
When it's cold, we complain. When it's hot, we complain. We complain literally about everything. But that is just us. We can't just do. At this point, I just think that if you have ACs in your house, you should be very,
Very, very
thankful. And if
grateful
you also
about
have fuel or lights to run those ACs, to, you should be thankful for them. All right, so we're moving straight to our newspaper for today, and we're taking Vanguard first. And major headlines for Vanguard is Mieti Allah, others back Amotekun, demands inclusion. Outfits not ethnic persecution, not for ethnic persecution. Akeredolu recruits only locals. Yoruba Congress advises. Amotekun not for Yoruba freedom. Pale says we can't curb crime without using arms. Agbekoya says you can find more on that story on page 11 of Vanguard newspaper, and we also have at the top area of the newspaper insecurity. Buhari service chiefs Kiari meets in Abuja as the CDS cautions against rivalry in military. And also we have on page 15, Igbo leaders tackles Governor Umahi over comment on Southeast security. You can find more on that story on page 15 of Vanguard newspaper. And we also have Oluwo, I will respect my suspension. You can see that story on page 39 of Vanguard newspaper. And lastly, on Vanguard newspaper, we have Oshomole's men knock APC Governors Forum, DG over memo. PDP wooing Obaseki with Jonathan's visas, not true, says Edo State government. You can find more on that story on page 35 and also on page 5 as well. And from Vanguard, we move to The Guardian.
And on the front page of The Guardian, at public hearings, Yoruba leaders Oki and Motekun. It has come to stay, says Akeredolu. Fala seeks prosecutorial power. Tinubu not against Amotekun. Mieti Allah backs a security agency. Details can be found on the front page, and also it continues on page 6. NSA absent as service chiefs meet Buhari. CDS urges security agencies to synergize on nation security. President Oki's community on humanitarian action. Details can be found on page 7 of The Guardian. And moving on to other stories, on the back page, 5 died protesting players' deaths in Shagamu as Inspector General of Police orders Deputy Inspector General to force a criminal investigation department to take over investigations. Details can be found on the back page. And on page 3, PDP seeks review of 2019 presidential election verdicts. And details can be found on page 3. And lastly, on the front page of The Guardian, new growth numbers stir controversies. Economists disagree as NBS figures beat IMF forecast. And from the front page of The Guardian, we'll go straight to the Punch.
And on the Punch, we have major headlines. APC fumes as PDP demands review of Buhari's Supreme Court victory. Certificate forgery allegation against President established at Apex Court. PDP says, a venture into farming if you are jobless. Ruling party tells opposition. We also have a photo story of Remo 2 killed as police disperse Shagamu protesters. There are pictures of people who are lying on the floor, and also protesters showing on the Punch newspaper. And also we have Lagos APC backs Tinubu, says ex-governor qualified, page 10. And on page 8 of the Punch, we have police detain Oshun man for allegedly defiling stepdaughter. And on page 10 as well, we have Oshun panel recommends abolition of single uniform and middle school. And lastly, on the Punch newspaper, we have Buhari meets service chiefs, NSA Mungunu absent, page 20 on the Punch newspaper. And from the Punch, move on to the Nation.
And on the front page of the Nation, PDP to demand Buhari's removal by Supreme Court. And the riders will ask for sack of Oyetola, Ganduje, Masari, and El-Rufai. Jobless opposition leaders should join rice farmers, says APC. Details can be found on the front page, and it continues on page 7. And on the stories about the nameplates, Army clashes with General over 636 billion naira, crisis over ownership. Footballers' deaths, 5-year dead as policemen protesters battle. Details can be found on page 4. And on page 7, CDS 6 Security Forces Synergy, Buhari meets service chiefs. And also, on the other stories, Nigeria's economy records a 2.27% annual growth. Details can be found on page 7. And moving on to the lower part of the Nation, Miyetti Allah, OPC, CAN, and Islamic group orders back Amotekun. Cops should have power to prosecute, says Farai. Adams, they ought to carry modern weapons. Details can be found on page 2 and page 3. And on the front page, we have a picture taken at the cross section of a potential Amotekun corps at the public hearing on the Operation Amotekun bill in Akure, Ondo State, and that was yesterday. And that's all on the front page of the Nation. And from there, we'll go straight to Daily Trust.
And on Daily Trust, we have major headlines. Anger as DSS gave anti-kidnapping manual to VIPs as masses fall victims of abduction. It's selective protection for elite service civil society group. You can find more on that story on page 5. And also we have on page 42, Bayelsa governorship, Supreme Court to hear APC's application for review tomorrow. And also on page 10, we have airline loses over 46.8 billion naira to Lagos airport, hiccups as travelers groan. And also we have Aisha Buhari wants security structure re-examined on page 3 of Daily Trust. And lastly, on Daily Trust on page 6, we have slain footballer, 2 killed as Ogun protest turns bloody. And that's all we have for you on the front pages of the newspaper. Remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. We're going to go on a very quick break. When we come back, we'll introduce in a very interesting guest that we always look forward to see every time he's around. And we'll be discussing on freedom of speech in Nigeria and how it affects us, how it affects the media, and how it affects Nigeria in general. We'll be right back. Right, welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's still today in the news on Banded Life, and my name is Precious Chukudi. We just took the newspaper review, and now we're moving on to our topic for the day. But we're going to analyze one of the top stories on Vanguard newspaper, and that is the Miyetti Allah and others back Amotekun demands inclusion. But we're going to first introduce our guest in the studio, and of course he's the publisher of Ilupeju Today. We look forward to always seeing him every time that he comes around. You're welcome, Mr. Dayo Akintobi. It's good to have you here this morning.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Right. Okay, so we'll just move on to what we have in our front page for Vanguard. And we have Miyetti Allah, others back Amotekun. demands inclusion. And this is coming from some weeks ago. We had Mieti Allah saying that they are not in support of Amotekun because they see it as a way of, how they want to just sideline, the Fulani people, and they had their own reasons why they felt like Amotekun wasn't something that was going to benefit them. And all of a sudden they are saying, they want to be involved in it. What do you think about this?
They see that there's great public acceptance for Amotekun and other such security forces. So they can't swim against the tide. They have no choice but to be swept up and caught up in this public approbation of something that will improve the lives of our people. Now, what is interesting to me is the fact that they are demanding inclusion, that their members be allowed to be a part of these security forces. On its face, that's quite ludicrous, actually. The reason being that Amotekun primarily is being set up to fend off cowherders, kidnappers, bandits, primarily who have been identified as members of Mieti Allah and other such groups. So how would you now say we're setting up a group to fight against this particular insurgency, and then you allow members of that particular insurgency to be a part of that security force? That's a contradiction, it won't work. So for Amotekun to be successful, first and foremost, as a complement to the police force, they rely on intelligence, they rely on information, they rely on local knowledge and familiarity with the terrain, and that can only be efficient if real locals are involved. People who speak the language, people who are from the vicinity, people who are known, that the community trusts and is familiar with. So if all of a sudden you are including people who are maybe random passers-by or maybe nomads who move from place to place, they're not fully settled in your midst, you can't really say you trust them to the point of including them in your security force, which originally is designed to fight against external aggression. So I think that's a non-starter, the issue of trying to have people who are not indigenous to a community to be members of that security force.
Right. So thank you for that one that you just said. So we're just going to move on to our topic for today, which is freedom of speech in Nigeria. And well, I'd like to ask you first, what exactly is freedom of speech, and what are the rights it's supposed to cover for the average man? Because it seems like some of the things that are written in this constitution, they are like, here, neither here nor there, and we're not even sure if these are the things that we read. So what exactly is freedom of speech, and what are things it covers?
Okay, in a democracy, there are certain rights and privileges that the Constitution vests on the people to be able to secure that democracy. One is that we should be able to speak out against unfavorable government policies. We should be able to speak out against leaders that we don't appreciate what they're doing. If you gag people from being able to speak their mind, then it allows the leadership to run roughshod over the populace. So freedom of speech is a check and balance against autocracy, against dictatorship, against an authoritarian regime. So people must always be vested with that right and privilege to be able to speak their mind without fear. That's what freedom of speech is all about. It's about us not being intimidated or afraid that we'll be locked up or arrested or executed or whatever the sanction may be. We need to be able to know that we can speak our mind freely without fear or favor.
Okay, what is the current state of freedom of speech currently in Nigeria?
You're talking here now, aren't you? You spoke yesterday on TV and you're still here, you're not locked up.
No, as regards to the press now, because in the case of Agbajalingo, the Southern State Cross River Publication, the publisher's Cross River Watch paper. I think he was arrested sometime last year and released early this year. He said he was arrested after the publication of an article against alleged corruption, and people are asking that this arrest, is it not posing threats? Is putting fear in the minds of the journalists and all the people out there against freedom of speech.
Without a doubt, not just freedom of speech, but freedom of the press as well,
Yes.
because there's this thing called intimidation. If, for example, I think about what happened to Agba Jalingo, who ostensibly was doing his job as a journalist investigating purported or alleged corruption in the Cross River State government, and he writes an article about it in the course of his investigation, and he ends up in prison for so many months. I would be scared to do something similar. Even if I hear of a corruption situation and I investigate it, I'm intimidated now, because I'm suddenly thinking, will I end up in prison as well? Will I end up in jail, even though I'm speaking what I believe to be the truth? So there is an intimidation factor in what happened to Agba Jalingo. However, let's look at it this way. As responsible journalists, as journalists who are meant to be responsible and who are the fourth estate of the realm, the reason they call us the fourth estate of the realm is because we play a role in government accountability. We keep government in check. We shine this searchlight on government activities to be able to make sure that there's no abuse, there are no excesses, and things like that, and make them accountable to the people who elected them. But nonetheless, that comes with a grave responsibility. We've got to make sure our facts are accurate. We've got to investigate properly. There's freedom of speech and freedom of the press, but that freedom is not absolute. You're free to swing your fist, but that freedom ends where my nose begins. Do you understand? So there's limits on that freedom. You can't just say anything. You can't incite people against the government, for example. You can't blatantly tell lies against people. Where I seem to want to draw the line, though, is that I think we have laws already in place against libel, against defamation of character, against slander, against all these things that are meant to check people from just saying things errantly without being accurate. Those laws, if our judiciary was stronger, if we had an efficient judiciary that attended to matters quickly instead of cases dragging for years and years and years, if those laws were effectively implemented, then us journalists would be curbed by the fact that if I say something that is challengeable, I can be sued.
Okay, so that brings me to this question I want to ask. Are there informations that should be protected by the media and government?
When it comes to national security, there's a lot of things that we as regular citizens are not privy to. There are security briefings that the president, every day, they put a brief on his table that tells him about the security situation in the entire country. They can't reveal that to people like us, to the general public, because it will undermine the security architecture that they're trying to use to address the challenges. So there are things we shouldn't know. That's why we elect competent leaders to guide us and lead for us. We trust them and we put our lives in their hands because we believe in their competence to be able to do the right thing to keep us secure, to keep us safe, and to give us to create an environment that enables us to live a good life. So once we've given them that responsibility, let's leave it to them to run with it. However, that's what you have the media for, is to always periodically check to make sure that they are doing the right thing. And when they're not doing the right thing, we point it out that they're not doing the right thing. We should not be afraid to do that because of a fear of being locked up.
Okay, so we have these two bills that were proposed, as the hate speech bill and the social media bill. And of course, when this whole proposal came out, there was a lot of uproar here and there. You know, people were already saying these people are trying to stifle us. They don't want us to talk. They want to. There were even ongoing protests. You know, people saying, "Oh, this bill is for us not to finally have any say again." So, what exactly do you think that the hate speech bill and also the social media bill stands for?
Hate speech, the problem with hate speech is that it has a tendency to be divisive. It has a tendency to set one group off against another. It has a tendency to make people feel negative towards the government. And so, if you look at how rampant fake news is on social media, you really can't blame the government for saying, look, it can't go on like this, we've got to do something. But there's got to be a balance between trying to police social media and trying to now gag people from speaking. For example, there was an issue in the news yesterday where somebody misinterpreted what the Sultan of Sokoto said. He said innocently he was speaking about Boko Haram, and a journalist took it and made a hash of everything the Sultan said and turned it upside down and caused panic among people that it looked like the Sultan was speaking in favor of Boko Haram, whereas the Sultan never said anything to that effect. He was basically trying to explain what the situation is and what should be done about it. Now, look at what that has done. It has caused disaffection against the Sultan. It has probably made Boko Haram begin to feel like, yeah, we have proper backing now. So it's caused a problem that has exacerbated the security situation. So should such a journalist be just allowed to get away with causing such disaffection and chaos? Because that's what happened. So he has apologized. But that apology is after the fact, and there's some people who've already got it in their brain and run away with it. So there have to be some kind of checks on excesses by journalists. Whether it now becomes a civil matter for things like slander, libel, defamation lawsuits, or whether it should now be criminally charged. The criminal aspect of fake news and hate speech is when it borders on sedition, when it borders on treason, when it borders on things that undermine the government. But those kind of laws are very broad. So government has the liberty to charge anybody under those laws. Look at what happened with Sowore, for example. He called a protest, said let's speak out against injustices, let's speak out, and he was charged under treason. So treason laws are very, very broad, and it's up to the government to decide. You and I may look at it and say, oh, he just said something that, government can look at it and say, I can interpret that to mean you're inciting people against my government. Now, it's up to the courts to now determine whether you did. The government has the right to charge anybody with anything.
Okay, looking at this hate speech bill and what it is, the government, when they presented this bill, it said it's to curb false material or things that might stir up ethnic hatred or abusive or insulting things. And according to the punishment that was given, it said it might actually lead to life imprisonment, or in a case that it results to loss of life, it might lead to death sentence, like death by hanging. So with this punishment and this, do you think, as a media person, do you think this punishment is too excessive?
If a life is lost, our laws in Nigeria say that if you're responsible for the loss of a life, whether you I don't know whether you do it directly, whether you cause it, if you're responsible for the loss of life, the price you pay is XYZ, possibly even execution. So whether you kill with a pen or you kill with a gun, killing is killing. If you are responsible for taking a life, then whatever the penalties are for taking a life, you're due for that as well.
But a public affair analyst, Ubagaya, he gave an opinion. And he said, instead of passing this bill, why not reach to these social media people like the Facebook, the Instagram, reach out to them and tell them that they should curb their content, things that will come out, they should be able to look at it before it's presented to the public. So what do you think about this?
Facebook and WhatsApp and Google and many other online platforms have put in filters and put in various mechanisms to try and restrict fake news. But they're limited in what they can do. The ingenuity of the human mind can create and innovate things in seconds that filters cannot catch. Look at the story I told you yesterday, they twisted what the Sultan said. How would a Facebook app or a Facebook filter catch that and know it's not true? They would have had to have been at the Sultan's speech, captured what he said, weighed it against what this journalist is writing. Do you know how much information is flying per second all across the world? They can't police it. They can try. And I know Facebook in particular is making a lot of efforts. But what Facebook has done is to try and reach out to the media and say, let's collaborate on this. Let's go through processes. For example, I know Facebook put on a course where they gave us various tools for us as the first line of responsibility to do the screening of our stories. So There's an app where you can take a video or photo and throw it in there, and it'll tell you when that photo was originally taken, so that you're not using a picture of MTN office burning from 20 years ago and making it seem like it was the Lekki crisis of last week. So you can confirm your photos and your videos before you post them. You can confirm your stories as original or fake. So the responsibility should lie with the purveyor of the information. The medium, the Facebook, the Google, they're secondary sources. They're just the vehicles by which we use to transmit the information. But what's the responsibility of the person who is creating the information to begin with? I think it is at that point that the scrutiny should occur. It is at the point of the creation of the message. In other words, me, the journalist, should do the work to confirm first that my work is accurate. Then, when I've put it on the medium, the filters from the online people, they have much less work to do. If you're giving them raw content and expecting them to have the right filters, they can't catch 1% of what is out there. In
But
terms of
some
fake
people
news.
feel that this bill is targeted at our government critics.
Well, yes, it could muzzle criticism of government, but there has to be a balance somewhere. You have to give opportunity cost. You have to give up something to get something. So yes, it could muzzle some criticism of government, but it also will sanitize at the end of the day the airwaves in which all this information is passing. I think the law as written now is a bit draconian. I think it needs to be looked at a little bit better. And I know the Ministry of Information is organizing a stakeholders meeting to occur late February or early March that brings in all the players, media, civil society, religious bodies, for everybody to come together and brainstorm on how we can address the issue of hate speech and fake news without taking away, without abrogating the rights of people and the media.
Okay. So I would like to ask, how is the government supposed to empower the media to be independent?
Very good. The government recognizes the media as an ally and a partner in deepening democracy, both in Nigeria and around the world. Media has been acknowledged in its role. And essentially, government also is in media. For example, in Nigeria, the #1 radio station across the country, the Federal FRC and Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, NTA, the news channel, LTV, the news channel, those are government-owned media outlets, for example. And the way they operate their craft, the way that they disseminate information, this is government itself playing in the same fields of media as we are and setting the example that the rest of us also follow. So government has always tried to collaborate with media from a standpoint of the fact that we're allies with them in making sure that we disseminate the right information about their policies, their programs, their activities, their initiatives, and getting their messages out to the people and giving them feedback as well from the people. So I think government sees us as an ally and not an enemy.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Dayo Akintobi. You've been able to, break down these things in chunky bits for us to be able to understand. It was really nice to have you talk about freedom of speech in Nigeria. You're welcome once again, sir.
It's my pleasure.
Yes,
Thank
so
you very
we're
much.
going to go on a very short break, and when we come back, we'll be discussing sports with Damilola. She's going to be telling us everything that sports has to give to us today. All the Damilola, you have all the information, right? So we'll go on this quick break. When we come back, we'll discuss sports with Damilola. All right, welcome back, and we're talking sports with Damilola. And Damilola, what happened yesterday with Liverpool? And
Basically, actually, Liverpool won yesterday, and a lot of Liverpool fans are actually happy. You know, this morning I was listening to the online editor. You know, he was talking about Liverpool, and he was really excited with their performance. And I think that's how people have really been for this whole Liverpool match. But talking about today's matches on the Champions League, we have Chelsea versus Bayern, that's at 9 p.m. and Napoli versus Barcelona also at 9 p.m. So basically, these are the matches for today in the Champions League. And talking about the guy, I think you heard about the boy that was killed.
yeah.
That led to a protest, and this. I think investigations have really been open because the Inspector General of Police has really talked about it, and he said they will need to put deep investigation because people are really interested in this case. And Kobe Bryant's wife and other people really did memorial and other. So that's basically what's going on.
Alright, okay, so that's all you have on sports. And if you want to find out more information on sporting activities, you can equally hook up yourself with some Vanguard Sports and discover more sports stories on Vanguard. And this is where we draw the curtains. Remember that you can equally like, share, and subscribe on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. And this is the end of our news for today. Today in the news, rather. And my name is Precious Chukudi, and Dami.
I'm Damilola Ogunsekin.
Okay, so it's bye from us.